Anyway, my name is Bob Wayne. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales for DC Comics based in New York. Over here, Mr. Frank Quitely. And to my right, Mr. Peter Milligan. And sans microphone, Paul Cornell. So I'm just going to start off by asking the panelists a couple of questions, and then we will open it up so that you can ask us your nicest, most respectful, most British questions. And hopefully these will be much nicer and respectful than the California questions from last weekend. So Frank, you were telling me recently that your next project has been described to you by the writer as...
Det här klippet som vi har tagit då, vi hade lite problem med den tekniska utrustningen, så att, i ett segment när Frank Quitlys första fråga ställs av den här tråkiga DC-snubben,
ja.
Så fick inte med en del av svaret och en del av frågan. Och frågan var alltså Grant Morrisons och Frank Quitlys senaste samarbete, vad det handlade om. Och så.
Ja, det mest intressanta.
Ja.
Nej, det kanske inte var.
Men det var väl det Frank Quitely svarade var väl i princip att ja, som vi berättade i vårt Kapow special avsnittet, att det handlar om en single issue som de skulle göra tillsammans, som där delarna av skulle bli en helt annan helhet och sådär, och så gjorde han en liten skön Grant Morrison vad ska man säga, imitation
kan vi, ja.
Ja, sådär. Och sen så ja, alltså Quitley hade en liten tendens att, ska man säga, prata runt istället för att faktiskt svara på frågan.
Ja, dessutom är det här projektet väldigt hemligstämplat fortfarande.
Ja, och det var väl lite det som det var sådär, ja.
Ja.
Men det var bara några minuter som ni missade, så att vi lämnar åter tillbaka till panelen helt enkelt.
And it was going to take me the longest time, so...
And that was a persuasive pitch to you to say, yes, I'll sign on for this.
Well, no, I had already agreed to do it when I thought it was just a simple project.
So what we're talking about is an issue of an upcoming series project called Multiversity.
Yeah.
And you're drawing just one chapter of Multiversity for Grant?
As far as I'm aware, it's... I don't know hardly anything about this. It's a bunch of different books. I don't know how many.
Nor do I.
I'm going to say 7, but...
7 sounds like a very good magic number.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, see, I'm with you.
I'm drawing one of them, and I'm drawing the most difficult one, and it's called Pax Americana, and it's based on the Charlton characters.
So Captain Atom, The Question, Blue Beetle, those questions, those characters that
I guess I don't know if
they haven't been seen much, in recent years. So
yeah.
All right, and then I guess the other thing that recently there was a video of All-Star Superman.
Yes.
And I believe you were the artist of All-Star Superman. So what was it like seeing the work you did in the comic translated to animation? Was that a positive experience? Were you surprised by it?
It was positive, yeah. I knew they would have to simplify my drawing style slightly and iron out some of the idiosyncrasies. Because the way I draw isn't, it's not ready for animation, let's put it that way. So I was fully expecting it to be slightly different. I haven't actually seen all of the film yet because DC sent me a copy, and I sat down with the only one of my 3 kids who was interested in watching it. And we sat down and we started, and we were about 10 or 15 minutes in, and my mum turned up, and she hadn't been up for like something, and she'd come in and she'd make me a cup of tea. And, you know, I've not got the kind of mum that you say, no, I'm watching a cartoon, no, we're going to I got up and made her a cup of tea, and my son kept watching the DVD, and I thought, I'll go back to that tomorrow night. And then I had a couple of nights of trying to get things tidied up before going to America. I just didn't get round to getting back to it. So as soon as I go up the road, Monday or Tuesday, I'll watch the rest of it, so that I'm prepared for the next time I get asked.
And your child that wanted to see this, your child completed viewing the entire program?
Oh yeah, he loved it. Yeah.
Okay.
He's 13. He thought it was really good.
So that's a positive review.
And yeah, and I can say the first 10 minutes are very good.
All right. A ringing endorsement of All-Star Superman from Warner Brothers Animation. In fact, I think Paul already, didn't you see All-Star Superman, Paul?
Yes, he was great.
See, it was great. But it is tough to move on from that. So, Mr. Milligan, this is kind of the year of Green Lantern. You know, Green Lantern movie coming up, Green Lantern a DVD animation project, a game. Green Lantern's going to be on Cartoon Network coming up as well. And so, because you're kind of iconoclastic, you're doing a Red Lantern project. Is that true? That you said no Green Lanterns for me.
I don't think they'll trust me with Green Lantern. We had Jeff Johns phone me up and asked me about my views on Red Lantern, which weren't exhaustive because I hadn't really read too much of it. But it's a really interesting subject for a comic book, I think, because it deals with something which I think a lot of us feel, a lot of the world feels, which is rage, which is anger, which is what you do with that anger. So the Red Lantern Corps is about this group of insane monsters on a planet called Ishmael, and they kind of embody what rage is, and their mission is to kind of wreak vengeance on everyone who has caused rage in other people. So it's a fairly bleak outlook, I suppose, from the outlook. But what we're trying to do is instill some consciousness into these creatures, so they're not just insane monsters, and they have some kind of clashing point of view. So in some ways they're like the Sopranos, well, turned into these creatures that can wreak havoc.
I will hopefully sleep tonight knowing that they're like the Sopranos in the DC universe.
I mean, you probably won't notice that.
Okay, but you're scaring me. I'm assuming we're here with Paul and leaving with Frank.
They don't live in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. They're not on the planet New Jersey.
They're not.
That is good. All right, and I think you're also doing something for the Flashpoint project that we're not talking about all that much. You're just teasing people and saying it exists.
That's right.
We're not going to give them any information because...
No information at all?
No, well, maybe the smallest bit of information.
Well, it features Shade the Changing Man, who obviously I wrote a number of years ago for DC Comics, the imprint that was going to become Vertigo, and it was, I guess, one of my first major works for DC Comics. And it's a character that I've got a lot of fondness for. So we're bringing Shade the Changing Man back, putting him in the DCU, and his weirdness and his strangeness and his madness is wreaking havoc through the usually august and more sensible corridors of DC Comics.
And then we'll walking down these sensible corridors of DC Comics. Paul, you've been working on this very big, epic Lex Luthor story in Action Comics, which I think has a bit of a story beat coming up in Action Comics number 900. Any feeling of responsibility to be working on Action Comics number 900? I mean, it's not many comics get to have issue numbers as high as 900 without, like skipping a whole bunch in between.
Sheer terrible. If I thought about it for any length of time, I would be able to do it. It's big shoes to fill. There are no shoes. You just have to do it, really. It's a great honour, and it's really nice to finish a proper story in comics as well. Because 900 really solidly finishes Lex Luthor's 10-issue story, and starts off a new story for Superman and Doomsday in the one story. Because somebody said to me, a lot of people use anniversary issues as the place they stop reading a particular comic. So we've got a dirty great cliffhanger at the end of 900 which says this story is complete, but we're going on and we'll see you for 901. And it's a dirty great little story. But we've got a 51-page lead story and then loads of extras in the back of the book as well. This will challenge the stapler's art. I'm not sure how much staplers want.
Yes, it's done by a bunch of little old ladies in Canada. They hand staple thick comics that way. So sometimes you'll have those little pieces of paper saying personally stapled by number and that.
It's little Canadian ladies with huge muscly arms.
Stapled by babies.
Yes, indeed. It's a very rough job, but if you're ever in Canada and looking for work, stop by. We'll give you a reference.
This is a bit of a surreal panel already, isn't it?
It is. It's a very surreal panel already. Once again, I think my having been on a similar panel last week, 8 times away, could be adding to the tone of the moderating on that. And then recently you did a project which seems relatively British-centric, the Knight and Squire. You had to explain your references to many, well, I'm not even sure your editors in New York got all the references, because I would kind of go down there and be like, do you understand what this means? I've been there a couple of times. This is not something you say to a person as an act of kindness. So, did you have any other translation problems working on Knight and Squire?
Hugely. I had to send Janelle a document, Janelle Siegel, the editor, a document listing what all the slang meant in detail so she could be sure just how filthy the comic was. We created 130 new British superheroes and supervillains across the 6 issues of Knight and Squire. We counted everyone, they're all named and everything.
But yet, none of you are in costume today, as far as I can tell, as any of those new characters in Knight and Squire.
Well, I have met individually every single person who bought it.
It's always a good feeling there.
Well, I must say, I really love it. It's my favourite thing I've ever done in comics, Knight and Squire. Please do check it out.
I'll be coming up in book form soon. By the way, I am the sales guy, so the idea that 900, is not a good place to stop reading, but continues and you have to read 901. That is an excellent idea, and I will encourage that. All of the writers that we work with. So, do any of you have any questions? If you want to ask questions, I guess you can raise your hand. There's one man holding a microphone. I don't know if you're volunteering. There's 2 men holding microphones, so if you want to watch them try to wade through the crowd, you raise your hand, and we'll see if we're willing to answer your question. Yeah, well, you've chosen wisely to choose a person that you have easy access to. Good point.
Good timing. I was actually going to ask, will there be more Knight and Squire? Because I'm one of the people who bought it. Is it going to be a follow-up series?
I don't think there's going to be a follow-up series, but I'm very pleased that Squire's appearing in Batgirl in the near future, and so the characters seem to have caught on a bit more as well. Great, yeah, I missed one. Thank you, nice to meet you.
This is a good exercise program for the guys with these staff shirts on. So ideally, if you can all take turns carefully, make sure you're on different parts of the room, so you have to run back and forth to keep this entertaining.
Yeah, this is for Peter. Could you write Hellblazer forever, please?
Well, that depends. I'm really enjoying it. So, I've got no plans to leave it. That's all I can give you. But, thank you.
Question for anyone on the panel who wants to answer. What's the best joke that has not gotten past an editor that you've written or drawn or yeah?
Well, I had one character say it was not so much a joke but a real Britishism, and talk about explaining things. I had someone say something for the weekend, sir. And I had to explain to the then Hellblazer editor that something for the weekend, sir, was a really old-fashioned thing that a hairdresser would say to his customer, and he would be referring to condoms. It'd be a euphemistic way of asking the person whose hair is cutting whether he wanted something for the weekend. And obviously it didn't see the light of day.
There's a panel in Lightning Squire that's obscured now by an enormous splash of milk. Because originally that panel had the milkman's milk of human kindness had splashed around the room, causing everybody to be calm and peaceful, and they were licking it off their lips going, milky. And Janelle sent us back the panel going, I am so horrified at you, how dare you do this to me? And me and James, we exchanged emails going, can you see what she's talking about? Is there something in the background on the wall? What's she talking about? Then we went, we see. And so we talked about making milk green or something that didn't make it any better. And so we finally just obscured the panel with a huge splash of milk. But I've got to say, we managed to have that entire conversation in a very British way without either side actually referring to what we were talking about.
What were you referring?
It's an all ages crowd, isn't it?
I actually had something, but it didn't appear in the comic. It was a conversation with Dan Raspler, who was my editor at the time, and he said something that could have been taken in either of one of two ways, and I kind of did my best Larry Grayson impersonation, said, "Oh, shut that door," and he went, "What do you mean?" And so I was trying to explain about Larry Grayson and double entendres and the whole thing, and then every time, for the rest of the time I worked with him, every time I said anything that could be read in more than one way, he'd say, "Hey, shut that door, right?" It was kind of odd.
I'm so hoping no one is recording this for a podcast later. All right. There's a person standing with the microphone, which indicates a certain...
I just thought it'd be nice to see you. Hello. I was just wondering, with Paul obviously using death in Action Comics and Peter working on Hellblazer, whether any of you were involved in anything that was kind of bringing the main DCU and Vertigo closer together, because obviously this week there's been a little bit of cross-pollination with the big reveal in Brightest Day, and what your thoughts are on bringing Vertigo into the mainstream as well.
Wow. I guess that was kind of a spoiler warning, since you didn't say what was in the issue of Brightest Day for anyone who may not have read their comics over the last 2 or 3 days. So, any thoughts about? Well, since you've already kind of were the canary in the coal mine with that, Paul. I mean,
well, we weren't aware that it was the start of anything. We thought it was just a one-off, and we were just, very pleased to do it for our individual comics. So I don't know if there's a policy about this or not. Is John Constantine going to show up in the DC universe?
I actually can't talk about it.
Sorry, I asked.
Is there such thing as the First Amendment in a comic book?
Well, there's probably not in the United Kingdom. See, the amendments is more like an American innovation off of the British common law. We'll cover that.
Well, that's I can't talk about it. It's not that I suddenly had a stroke.
It's a topic we don't want to address.
But by not addressing it, we are addressing it.
That is the heart of
surfing that way work.
Well, certainly, if you've seen Brightest Day 23, how many of you have seen Brightest Day 23? Some of you know that there's at least what appears to be a character who has been associated with Vertigo making an appearance. But that character also made appearances associated with DC Universe characters pre-Vertigo's existence. So you'll just have to wait with some level of suspense, or not, depending on how quickly you want to jump to conclusion that we're not talking about it right now. There definitely was a policy in the past where we were trying to keep the Vertigo characters that had originated in the DC universe somewhat separate from whatever is in Brightest Day 23, and what was in Action Comics with the appearance of Death that Paul, even coordinated with Mr. Gaiman on that. That we're loosening up. It's the new DC Comics. But it's an excellent question, and if you ask next year, I'm sure I'll have a better answer. Do we have any other questions over on the far side?
I got a question for Frank Whiteley. Do you know when Multiversity, the big DC story Multiversity you're doing with Grant Morrison, is going to be released?
No. I think the book that I'm working on is going to be the first one. So I'm sure I'll be done with that in a couple of months. It's not a joke. And, so I'm guessing maybe end of the year, beginning of next year. But it is a guess.
And I suspect next year, because I think we'll probably want to have some of the other afterwards. Yeah. That was more my concern, because I don't even know exactly what's in all of them at this point. And neither one of us knows what's in all of them. But it's a good question. But I guess the answer is you don't have to not buy anything for the next few months to save your money up for this. So you can buy that DVD of All-Star Superman, you can buy Hellblazer and the Red Lanterns, and you can pick up those Knight and Squire issues that Paul really wanted you to go and read because they're written just for you guys and certainly not for the editor in New York. So, next up.
Another multiversity question. To what extent is it going to be a fairly self-contained title? Because I loved in 52 that you brought back all the multiple universes, and since then, kind of nothing's happened with them. So, how far is multiversity standalone? How far is it going to affect the DCU more generally?
That's probably more a question for the writer of Multiversity than the artist of one of them.
I could just make something up.
Oh, you could make something up. And then we'll hear about it probably Monday. But let's go, let's give that a shot. Make something up.
All the stories are completely self-contained. When you read them all together, it's a completely new story. And it will change everything in the DC universe for about 10 hours.
You're saying that they should be read as individual issues, and they should be purchased again as a book. I like the way you're thinking on this. Yeah, that's good. I hope that doesn't answer your question.
I have a question for Frank Whiteley. First of all, thank you.
No, multiversity question.
No. First of all, thank you very much for the work you did on also Superman and Batman Robin. I'm a big fan. And the question is there any chance we will see you work together with Grant Morrison on his current Batman run, also in Batman Inc.?
On Batman Inc.? I don't know. That's the. I'm doing 10 extra pages of We3 just now for the deluxe edition that's coming out. 10 extra story pages, and then the next thing I'm doing is this Pax Americana, the multiversity book. Beyond that, I'm not sure, but I'm sure I'll work with Grant lots more in the future. So yeah, I actually had wanted to do a bit more Batman than I did because the Batman and Robin that I did, I was supposed to do the first 3 and the last 3 of Grant's run, and then I got a sciatica problem. I got this recurring back problem, and I had to pull out doing the last 3, which I was really disappointed about because they didn't have the Joker in them. So, but yeah, I don't know whether or not it will be that Batman stuff or something else, but yeah, probably at some point in the future.
Because for me, it's I always love the Morrison stuff, but when you draw it, it's much more. It's not as confusing.
I fix all the dialogue. We don't tell him. Don't tell him. Tell him.
And I think you also have the deluxe edition of Flex Mentallo is going to be coming out as well.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So something else to look forward to.
The Grant and I very soon. Is it very soon? Quite soon? This year, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's over the next year. Yeah. We three and Flex Mental, and then there's Joe the Barbarian. They have kind of three things in deluxe format by grant. Two of them drawn by you. So.
Is there any chance that you could put Nice and Squire in Batman Inc. at all? And if so, can Paul please write it?
Oh, thank you very much. Is there any chance? Because I'd want to write Batman Inc. That's got some sales. I'll ruin another one of Rob's comics.
Wow, what a pitch! I could ruin another one of Grant's comics. Much like your first pitch. Most of my Marvel titles have been canceled. I'd like to do the same for you.
When I started writing Action Comics, my wife said, well, I can't cancel that.
And I set that up because I heard that last year, and I thought it was a great line and true. Anything is possible with all these Batmen floating around. And you're still telling me exactly which ones are going to show up, but we'll have to. Well, I'll talk to Janelle and ask her if she wants to see more, and I'm sure she'll run away terrified from me.
You want to see more Knight and Squire, don't you?
Yeah.
That's 250 British people.
I think that's actually more than 250, but okay. How many? Are there 6 British people? All right. Any more questions?
Speaking of buying things, could we please have an absolute edition of Transmetropolitan? I would happily pay lots of money for it.
We will keep that in mind, that you would like to pay, if you're willing to pay a large enough amount of money for Absolute Transmetropolitan, I can almost certainly make that happen. But probably something more within your price range as a customer, we will see. The Absolutes, we only put a few of those out every year, and but certainly that's one that's been suggested by a number of people, so it stays under consideration.
Just a question to Peter Milligan about the Red Lantern comic series. Will it be a kind of a self-contained series that won't overlap with other Green Lantern series, or will it be?
No, I think the idea is it's an ongoing series. It will exist in the Green Lantern universe for sure, but I think it will have its own tone and their own stories which will occupy just the Red Lantern world and Atrocitus and all those other crazy characters. But sure, there will be opportunities for Green Lantern himself and the other lanterns to appear in it.
Hi. As well as the Red Lantern series, will there be plans for all the cores to get an ongoing or not?
There's no plan for all of the different Lantern Corps that you've seen to have ongoing projects right now. The Red Lanterns are the only ones that are getting a book coming up. But are you interested in seeing any of the other Lantern Corps? Laura, please. I'll mention that to Jeff Johns when I chat with him next. How's that?
Hi there.
Yes, it's very next time we do this, we're going to have a rule where you guys will stand when you ask me questions to help us focus on where we are in the room. Now we've let so many people get away without doing that. I feel bad now you're standing up. Talk about peer pressure.
Probably a question for each of you. Other than any of the series that you're working on at the moment, what are your favourite ongoing series at the moment?
Favorite ongoing series at the moment? This does seem like last weekend, doesn't it?
It does. Is Joe the Barbarian still ongoing? Is the last one out yet?
The last one's out now, I
Alright, I've got a couple of DC boxes that I've not opened because I've been working really hard.
Yes.
So yeah, I was actually really enjoying that. I was really enjoying Sean Murphy's art. It's nice when you see somebody that, you know, like, I don't know what else Sean's done, but he was new to me, and I was really impressed with that.
Pete, are you reading any comics right this minute? Well,
No.
obviously not right this moment.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been looking at some Wonder Woman. I thought it was looking very good at the moment.
I like Batgirl very much. Everything Gail Simone writes. I'm loving Hellblazer right now with this man. I'd love to write Hellblazer, but there so isn't a vacancy. But the unwritten Mike Carey, I think, is wonderful too.
No, I'm not going to answer. All right, over, there we are. On the chair, very impressive. We can actually see you.
It's for a question for Frank there, but if anyone's answered, it's fine. It's just over the last few years you've been working on sort of those classic characters like Batman and Superman and done them in your own kind of style. But is there any characters in the whole industry that you'd like to actually in the future, or anybody else, any characters, well, not just DC, but anywhere that you'd like to do in the future?
Obviously, I mean, my two favourite DC characters are Batman and Superman, so I've done them, and I'd be happy to do them again. I like the Joker, so maybe him at some point. I don't need as much Marvel stuff, but Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Hulk are all good characters. Maybe some create your own stuff as well in the future.
Peter, are there any characters that you haven't written that you'd like a chance to write sometime?
DC characters. Batman is always a really interesting character. I have written him in the past, but I have some kind of ideas for Batman. I think he's such an archetype, and such an interesting one. I think he continually draws you back to wanting to write him. I know that didn't quite answer the question, but Batman is a character I find is always quite compelling and interesting.
One day they'll give Pete wisdom back to me.
I think I've already answered. Hellblazer, really. No pressure.
Well, and to think that I introduced the two of them, and now Paul's already trying to suggest to Pete that he should step down from Hellblazer.
I'm not anything bad. I want him to stay put. It's great.
Oh, okay, but if something does happen to him.
That's an unfortunate accident.
If crossing the road to the pub later, there was something that happened.
I'm not going to take this any further.
A wise choice for all of us. Do we have another? Is there another question? Yes, we are over there.
Hi, this question is for Mr. Quietly. Firstly, these are both really specific. Firstly, thank you so much for giving Talia a really cool hairstyle in that panel of Batman and Robin in which she appeared in a photograph of Damien. I think that was number 2 or something. And but my question is, this kind of goes back to your past work. In Batman 666, we saw a really specific look for the Dollatrons as created by Professor Pig. And then when you took up the design in Batman and Robin, their appearance was completely different and a lot more grotesque. I've been wondering for a long time, what was your inspiration for that new design of the Dollatron?
Grant just asked me to base the look of the Dollatrons on the description that he'd given me, and he was very specific in his description. Often Grant actually, if he's designing a new character, he'll do a kind of thumbnail sketch and send it to me, but on this occasion he just described them in some detail, and it was like a kind of lumpy, fleshy, kind of like one of those hockey masks, you know, that fuses onto your face. some reason makes your hair go red and curly. It seems unlikely when you start talking about it. So yeah, it was really just based on the description in the script. Anybody else?
The current Flash run at the minute, is that going to be ending before Flashpoint, or is it still going to be ongoing?
For those of you who couldn't hear his question, he wanted to thank us all for coming such a great distance today. And how impressed he was on such a typical sunny British afternoon that we're here in this dark room. And you're welcome. Always happy to do that. You know, I think what you're looking for is the Rosebuds the Sled panel. And that's the one that tells you the secret of what's going to happen next. And that's in the next room. Okay.
This is a question for everyone on the panel if you wanted to answer it. I just wanted to know what the relationship was with DC as a company, who obviously has a bit of an interest in how things are depicted and how they want to see their characters developed, and being an individual artist or a writer, and perhaps things you perhaps want to push or explore. What are they like as a company to work with in terms of that? Have you had any experience of, I guess, perhaps where you want to really experiment with something?
And you're going to ask this question when I'm up here as well. That is really so thoughtful of you. That's exactly what I was asking for, those nice, respectful British-style questions.
Tell you later.
I'm just, the reason I asked, I'm just reading the back to the Batcave Companion and just hearing about conversations with artists and writers and editors and where conflicts arose.
I've got to say, and this is honest, having worked in television, comics are an absolute picnic in comparison. And I think this is why comics likes TV writers, because we become pre-bullied. And both companies, I've had my ups and downs at Marvel and DC, but they are just ups and downs. You know, I've never had calls to have an artist drop and walk off or anything like that. There are some things that you're asked to do, there are some things that can't be done. It's their universe, they own it, you're playing in it. I've always had, really, at the end of the day, nothing but a good time. You know, just some tiny bumps along the way. And I look back at old creators talking about their time in comics, and often the things that they're complaining about seem to me to be quite small. You know, things which aren't necessarily worth bothering talking about. But I guess maybe that's just me, but you know, obviously next year something awful will happen to me. I'll be saying, oh, you'll never guess what they've done. But,
yeah, I think it depends on your relationship with the individual editor. I think for me in comic books, having a good relationship with a particular editor is like key. And so obviously with some editors you're really close, it becomes a friendship, and therefore, you know, things that might be a problem in other relationships, just kind of like you just sort it out. But it's always about, I think one of the things which is a decider for me whether I want to work on something is often about the editor and the relationship I have with the editor. So you then know when there's an issue arises, and obviously you want to do something in a, I mean, the script, the latest script I've written for Hellblazer, the editor really liked it, had some thoughts, and perhaps she has an idea where the story should go, which I disagree. So sometimes you just need to sort it out, and I find that as long as you're being rational and it's not just about ego, and if you have a point of view, the story comes first, and it's about getting the story right, and it's not just about getting your own way because your ego demands it. I find as long as you can leave your ego out of it sometimes. It's difficult to leave that ego out all the time. As long as it's about the story and you've got a good relationship, it's a pretty, as the person down there said, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think I agree with both the views expressed so far. I've always found I mean, it's DC that I've worked with most over the years, but project changes or seems to change slightly once you've already started it, and you work around it, and if, there've been very few occasions where I've had kind of any real problems. But I think I haven't worked in television, but I've worked for advertising agencies, and I've done some bits and pieces for games development and various other things. I've got to say that the real beauty for me of working in comics is that there are so few people involved in the creative process. There's group editors and there's the editor you're working for, and there's some general direction that things are going in. But really, when it comes down to actually producing the work, there's a writer and an artist, or a writer and an artist team, and that's just a real treat, rather than being a tiny cog in a gigantic machine. From a creative point of view, it's actually really satisfying.
Thank you.
We've got time for a couple more questions, and we have another question.
When you're taking on a new project with existing characters, how do you ensure that the project is faithful for the old fans, but also allows new fans to jump on? Maybe they haven't heard of the characters before or not familiar with it at all. So how do you find that balance? What's the process in terms of the artistic side, but also the business side?
That's a very good question. Well, I think with John Constantine and Hellblazer, they had a really long history with a lot of really good writers that worked on it. I think that you have to have a vision. I think you have to have that vision where you can say what you want to say using that character, but at the same time there has to be a core part of that book, and the flavour of the book, and what that book tries to achieve. That you do carry on. But if all you're trying to do is doing exactly what the other guy has done before you, then it's a waste of time you're doing the book. So there has to be a balance between what you want to do with the book, the changes you want to implement in the book, but at the same time those core elements of the book that you feel has to go on from one writer and one series to another. I mean, that's out of my experience on Hellblazer, which seems to be relevant to that question.
I've become increasingly dissatisfied with continuity as I write more comics. I used to be a very continuity-heavy writer. Now, I think, honestly, we should be writing everything so that new readers could hop aboard. And in Action Comics, I made a conscious effort to introduce each villain that Lex met, as if nobody had read about them before. Even the Joker, to some extent. And it's all comics fandom seems to talk about continuity. I'd rather we talked about story. And I think actually, in some ways, continuity canon is the enemy of story. I think there's just now too much of it to usefully base good stories on stuff that's really old. I think that the universes are just too large and complex. Somebody's probably told the story you're going to tell before, and what you should do really is be true to the character that so many people have built up over time, and do a kind of character continuity. That is to say, make the audience go, oh yes, that's them, I know him, he is the character I have read about before. But I've turned completely around. I used to be a continuity guy, and now I'm so not.
And since you've asked if there's a business component, I think there is, but you don't want to do anything that deliberately seems like you're sending people away who've invested a lot of their collecting or their reading in a character, but you also don't want to make it where it's really inaccessible to people coming in. One of the things that's changed dramatically is now that we repackage stuff in book form, so there's no feeling that everything is somewhat transitory, that there's an issue, it's on sale for a month, and there's another one, and there's also not the same assumption that would have happened when I was a kid starting to read comics, that people would only stay reading comics for 4 or 5 years, and then you'd stop, and so that anything that was a story that was told 10 years earlier, well, you could tell the same basic kind of story again because the readership would have completely changed. And now, of course, it would just be, there would be, 100 new blog postings talking about how this is the same story that you told 10 years ago and how insulting it is that we took your money for it again. So that's changed a lot. As far as the continuity that Paul was mentioning, I think that it can definitely, get in the way of telling the story and making where there is a bridge between the longtime reader and the new reader. I think you have some continuity aspects that remain constants. I think that Batman is Bruce Wayne, and if you tell a story where he's not Bruce Wayne, the readership will wonder as much why as anything else.
Haven't you just been telling lots of stories where he's not Bruce Wayne?
Understood, but the readership knows that at some point we're going to circle back to that. But if you tell a story, in 1990 that explains how Batman was able to carve a passage big enough for a car to go in and out of his cave, and then you tell the same story again in 2012, and you don't use the same method of drilling the exit from the Batcave, I don't think that matters all that much, unless I wrote the 1990 version, which I didn't, so we're good. But I don't think that should stand in people's way of insisting that stuff, like the first level stuff with Batman, Bruce Wayne, Gotham City, I think those are, everyone knows that. Even people who aren't in this room, who aren't in this building, probably know that on the street. When you get down to what's Alfred the Butler's last name, or what was his prior experience, I don't think that you have to be consistent to that for everything from Detective Comics 2017 to now, because I think that could easily stand in the way of telling a story.
I think there are some editors that perhaps don't entirely go along with that view.
I believe that some of them work on the same floor that I work at.
I'm sure they do. And I think sometimes it's not giving the readership enough. I think readership actually are willing to understand that this is a comic book, this is a new writer, something to be slightly different, and what's important is the story. And I think sometimes some DC editors are perhaps worried, or perhaps don't give the readership enough credit to be able to see the difference between a comic book written by a different writer at a slightly different stage. As long as those core elements are, as long as the core elements are adhered to.
Hello. It's a similar question in a way, but when any of you are facing a completely new project, what kind of creative processes do you use to get yourself going? Like how do you begin something completely new and get yourself into it?
I think it's initially about, I initially panic, then I plot. I walk around the house plotting, I wake up in the middle of the night and write things on my iPad, and then I do a big plot document, and then my editor goes, no to half of that. I go, yes, of course you're right, and but it's really about initially approaching a new project with plot, with saying what stories can I tell, how can I tell them, who are these people, what's surprising. I'm in the middle of this process at the moment, which feels really nice. And it's that. It's a hard question to answer. It's kind of abstract, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes I think plot can be a problem to get involved in plot too quickly, because plot can just be stuff, and stuff is just stuff. And I think I try to work out in my head what the story is really about, what its themes are before I start getting into plot, because the plot should, in my view, the plot should follow on from what the story is about, what the themes are, and that then, if you like, informs and offers you a plot. If plot comes too soon, I think you're just doing stuff, these comic book characters running around. So for me personally, I like to get under the skin of something and finding out what is this story really about, what's the important stuff that's what I'm trying to say. And once you have that, plot often falls into place, because it's clearly going to happen this way or that way, depending on what a story's about.
It's much easier for me because every time I start a new project, it starts with getting a script from a writer who's already gone through all his process to get it to this stage. So for me, it's a different thing. It's just reading and rereading the script until I can really see it in my head, and then going through the process of actually making that work as a visual narrative. So I don't have the pacing the house at night. And to some extent, I don't even have to have the getting under the skin of the characters. It's actually just getting familiar enough with the script that I feel I really know the story I've got to tell, and then it's just about me doing my best job at actually telling that. So it's quite a different process really for an artist.
So we have time for one more question. So it's got to be, the final question is quite a responsibility. Okay, are you ready?
I'm waiting.
Okay.
Okay, I was going to ask this, goes back to what Paul was saying, what Bob was saying, what Pete said, and we'll ignore Frank because he draws. It's about, you can go again. It's about, what you were saying about continuities. The thing is that's not, I've always felt as a reader that doesn't really sit very well with the DC characters because they're so archetypal in the way that Pete said. They're not, that works much better in the Marvel kind of world. And I don't know, DC characters being at their most DC, being at their strongest, seems to be when there's an enormous amount of consistency to the character, but it doesn't really matter what's going on in 150 different books. Of course, you don't publish 150 books, but that's... So I wonder what people think about that, and certainly that's an interesting thing that you were saying there, Paul, and how the Action Comics run has been quite well received, partly because it doesn't really impinge on other things. And death being in it, there's a lot of variety. Those early Batman stories you did in the late 80s and early 90s were great, that Pete wrote. You know, they don't really fit into continuity, but they're wonderful stories. And Grant took some of the stuff from that and used it in the recent run, didn't he? So I wonder what you think about that, because there's been a big tendency, isn't there, sort of since the mid, say 2004, 2005, to tie everything together.
Well, it's interesting that Grant, especially, just takes bits of Batman lore that he likes that can date back to the 1940s, and when he uses them, it looks like they're set in the 1940s sometimes. So he's, in order to tell these magnificent stories, he's actually completely ignoring the physical realities of a comics continuity universe, and I think that's admirable. I'm not sure we could all do it all the time without creating a sort of strange situation, but yeah, I think iconhood is the thing, that because they are big icons, you know, a lot of stuff has happened to Death, and I bet she doesn't talk about it very much, and we don't have to refer to it.
I agree with that. Well, you're disappointing end.
Have we disappointed you, Bob? Have we done well?
No, and I think our audience has done well. They asked a balance of questions for everyone, and they've been very quiet and very respectful and very nice. We'd like to thank all of you for taking your time to be here with us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you around the convention. So thank you very much.